Allora, buonasera, eccoci.
Good evening to you all. Here we come with the third meeting of today. This is quite a peculiar day, as I said before in the meeting program. Together with Monica Maggioni, we wanted to organize this day, and we convinced her to come here. A meeting without Monica Maggioni would not be the same thing, I would say. So we've been thinking about this meeting, which is a bit different from others. As famously said by Pope Francis, the piecemeal third world, we have tried to understand what that means. And we wanted to discuss about these issues and have the opportunity to get into detail and make an in-depth analysis of this expression. This is why we entitled this day Piecemeal War and Roads to Peace. We don't want to provide the new map of the world, far from us. That would be too complex, but we've been trying to provide some food for thought and understand how the world has changed and is changing. This morning we started with Claudio Descalzi, ENI CEO, and we talked about energy resources, and we tried to get out from stereotypes. We all think that wars are made for oil, but this morning we understood that energy resources, gas and oil, can be a great opportunity for collaboration, cooperation and knowledge. As Claudio Scalzi said this morning, everything depends on man. In the early afternoon, we talked about religious freedoms with Adam Green. We talked about the Marrakesh Declaration, quite a remarkable one. The starting point is that conflicts arise from religion. Together with Brian Green, we have seen that the opposite is true, as in wars can be a factor for development. Tonight is the third meeting of this trilogy promoted by Monica Maggioni, and the title is How to Get Oriented in the Great Disorder. Monica is the president of RAI, the Italian state television. She's not going to talk about the disorder in RAI. She'll be facilitating the debate, and then we have Paolo Magri as a guest. He is the vice president of the Institute for International Political Studies. This is the main research center of international politics. It's very famous worldwide, and it carries out very important research on international politics. So welcome to Paolo. We've managed to have him with us. He was very busy, but we did manage to have him. So, let's talk about tonight's topic, and then we won't be finishing talking about this topic after this meeting, because there will be new people coming in, maybe next years. So, with the two of them, I'll be focusing on some issues to talk about complex modern times, which sometimes cannot be understood. So, let's start from a date that we all remember, as in September the 11th, 2001. You all know what happened. So, we've been living with this date for 15 years now. What has happened over these 15 years after the attack to the Twin Towers? That was the episode that tells us that we are living through complex times. I give you the floor, Monica. So, September the 11th, 2001. And today it's August the 20th, 2016. 15 years of coexistence with what, do you think? What have we been coexisting with? These 15 years were much complicated, where the only certainty we have is that all previous certainties no longer exist. This is the only thing we can agree on. That afternoon, on that day, I think you all remember where you were. It was like, I don't know whether 8:15 or 8:45 in the United States. Here it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we all remind that image. All of a sudden, we understood that there was something happening that would change our world forever. I don't know how many of you understood at that time that the world would really change and to what extent it would change. 15 years later, we come to grips with a world which can hardly be understood in terms of events, but we don't know where we are, and we cannot understand where we are, and we cannot have we cannot understand what role we can play in the current scenario. So what we've been trying to do today is to focus on some specific points in order to have some points of reference and to provide answers to some questions. Now, thinking about the world of September the 11th in the morning, before anything happened, before the first airplane crashed into the Trade Center, there was a time, there was a world characterized by crisis. Still, there was a clear scenario at that time, because we could understand what was happening. If a country was at war with another country, we knew what countries were at stake, we knew the interests of both countries. The reaction to the episode on September the 11th was in line with that scenario. The United States thought it was being attacked. It tried to identify attackers, as in terrorists and terrorist groups. It identified the terrorist groups, and it reacted to that. But there was a contradiction, because we know that some reaction had sense and was targeting something specific. So, Al-Qaeda, the grassroots organization, was responsible for that attack. Bin Laden was hidden in some mountains, and a war was waged in line with the rules applied before September the 11th. Then there were choices made out of a logic in line with the American policies. And that was the choice of striking Iraq 2 years later. And that choice was made on September the 11th because the documents and books and evidence shows that right that night, Bush, on September 11th, Bush decided to attack Saddam Hussein. And that choice was somewhat less logical. And that led to some change and some problems. The war of Afghanistan started, and at some point of the war in Afghanistan, some military forces were withdrawn to go then to Iraq, where they wanted to restore democracy. But that was a project promoted by Bush and his staff, who wanted to reimagine the role of the United States, especially in the Middle East. That should change forever and completely. So, attacking Saddam Hussein meant changing the US role. So, Iraq was not only a problem for the US, but was a problem was the reason for many problems that we're still witnessing today, because that started a strong destabilization of that region, which led to the disorder we have today. At that time, the United States played a vital role, and the US was very important because that led to fast changes in the international scenario. At that point, the US knew what to do, and you all remember Bush's theory. As in, he wanted to attack all his enemies one after the other, so starting from Afghanistan, hosting bin Laden, then Iraq. The list also included Iran, Syria, North Korea. But the idea was to respond to threats one after the other in order to reaffirm the US presence worldwide, in order to control the let's say the international situation, and in order to defend American interests at a global level. Now, in order to have a short summary, and it's a very short summary, so it's far from being precise, and believe me, we need to recall history because this is part and parcel of history. One of the major problems of what we're going through today is that we refuse wasting the necessary time in order to understand history and to recall history. So we still think that what is happening today has a very recent cause, and we do not understand that everything is connected. So it is important to understand and to remember what has been happening after September 11th. It's not because we're crazy enough, because we want to talk about that, but it's just because we need to recall one after the other what happened, historical events. Nothing has happened at random. There is no strange design, but some choices were made, right things were made, many mistakes were made, and this has all led to effects we have to come to grapple with. So what happened after Iraq invasion? Well, any possible mistake was made, starting from the elimination of Iraqi army, thereby thousands of Iraqi families went wandering around Iraq, and the Iraqi society was very angry against the invaders. They were the invaders and no longer the people that could provide a new opportunity. Whereas there was some time when the Iraqi thought that these people could bring about new opportunities. At the beginning, some Iraqis said that there was a new opportunity for them. But then there were later choices, and they were made in the wrong direction. So the army was eliminated, primary needs were not met, as in water, energy. People lived very badly, and that led to a local reaction that became more of a terrorist reaction. And that was that underlies, and that is the cause for our greatest major threat today. This is where the history leading to ISIS starts. Somebody says that ISIS was born with al-Baghdadi in 2012, with al-Baghdadi preaching in Mosul mosque. But this is not true. At that time, there were the seeds of what we're living today. Over these years, the US has radically changed its politics in Iraq. Now, talking about Obama presidency, and then in between there's many things, but we don't have time to discuss about that. But what happens during the Obama presidency? Well, Obama no longer wanted to fight abroad and wanted to recall the army to the US when Iraq was in its utmost chaos. At that time, the US totally disengaged in Iraq, and a stronger chaos remained in Iraq. The head of government was somebody only speaking to Iran. The country had Shiites in the south, Kurds in the north, Sunnis who had been the most powerful people for a long time and were no longer at power. So that was a very dangerous situation, and the US withdrawing did not simplify things. And this is really a very, very, very short summary of a foreign policy. If you quote, please do not quote me. However, the position of American policy totally changed. And that is very important because the Americans decided that they will no longer play at the forefront in the Middle East and Middle Eastern policies. And we see that in Libya, for example. At the same time, the Arab Springs came by, then they imploded, and they left chaos and destroyed countries. And that happened without the role that used to be played by the Americans, at least for 50 centuries. So that further complicated things. Europe was totally absent in this international scenario. Europe has never agreed on wars. Maybe that was the only topic where we should have agreed, but that was not the case. So, what happened? The countries, though having many constraints, though having dictatorships, though having many problems, but they were united. So, it's not that we want to go back to dictatorships, but on the one end, there were countries that no longer existed, with all the ensuing implications. There were groups of powers, different groups of powers acting inside countries with conflicting alliances. And when talking about malaise and impossibility to coexist, the jihadists and the terrorists came by. So inside this chaos, these groups had new opportunities that they didn't have before September the 11th. So there were countries that were totally destroyed where they could move freely and recruit new people. Public opinion was much more angry with respect to the West, and there was a fertile ground for them to build up what we have seen in recent months as in the birth of ISIS, terrorists, which affects us all. Even in politics, somebody is far cited, and Galloway says 2 days after September 11th, he says to The Guardian, the only test that will be successful, the only thing will be to see whether we have worsened or improved the things. If we launch a devastating attack against a Muslim country, 9/11/2001, if we launch an attack against a Muslim country and we kill thousands of people, and at that time we will build up 10,000 Bin Laden, then we will have lost because we will have 10,000 rather than the one we have tried to behead. 15 years later, there's not 10,000 Bin Laden, but we have 30,000 who are officially registered in the ISIS book. So 30,000 official terrorists, and we have potentially some 100,000 and many more that through the web decided to join the system. This is where we have to think how have we come to this situation, and what do we face right now? Now, let's give the floor to Magri, who is the Deputy Director of the Institute for International Political Studies and is also a professor at Bocconi University. Now, there are many experts studying the international politics. Today, you need to be a world expert in order to understand the current scenario because interdependence is very strong. So, Paolo, you are a world expert. What will the future be like? And Monica has been focusing on the Middle East, the United States, and other countries. Uh, what is the current scenario like?
Prosegue col Bignami, nel senso che i tempi che abbiamo sono tempi da Bignami, ma Monica ci ha descritto uno dei disordini che viviamo, il disordine del Medio Oriente, il disordine degli stati falliti, che tramite la cinghia di trasmissione del terrorismo è all'origine di una delle insicurezze che viviamo oggi, la sicurezza per la nostra incolumità legata al terrorismo. Ma ci sono altri disordini, altre insicurezze. Ecco, e la prima cifra di questa fase storica è proprio quella dei tanti disordini e delle tante insicurezze. C'è il disordine economico che si trascina ormai da anni, la Brexit, la crisi economica, le disuguaglianze, il disordine valutario, il disordine del mercato petrolifero, che portano sia nei paesi avanzati che in quelli emergenti all'insicurezza economica. Il ceto medio che sprofonda, o il ceto medio, pensiamo al Brasile, che si è appena creato, che già torna indietro dopo pochi anni che ha sognato di essere arrivato al ceto medio. Poi c'è il disordine dei confini e quindi il processo delle migrazioni che ci porta a un'altra insicurezza, poi vedremo se è percepita o reale, ma che c'è, che è l'insicurezza sociale. Ci sentiamo invasi nei nostri valori, nelle nostre culture, nei nostri spazi. E a questo si aggiunge, perché non sono spariti, sono cambiati, come diceva Monica Maggioni prima, ma i vecchi rischi geopolitici. Abbiamo ancora la Russia che invade la Crimea, abbiamo la Cina che crea qualche problema nel Mar Cinese meridionale, abbiamo, non ne parliamo poco perché abbiamo tante altre cose di cui parlare, la Corea del Nord che è sempre un problema del mondo. Tante crisi, tante insicurezze ci fanno parlare di ansia delle società, di preoccupazione, continuamente in treno, sul pullman, senti la gente che dice che mondo, che situazione, che tempi. Qui la storia però, e Monica lo anticipava come tema, ci deve venire in soccorso per capire che stiamo davvero vivendo delle crisi, prendiamole individualmente, che sono serie, alcune sono molto serie, ma quasi nessuna di queste crisi individualmente è ingestibile. Abbiamo visto negli anni, ma non parlo del 2000 anni fa, abbiamo visto di peggio di quanto stiamo vedendo adesso, per ogni singola crisi presa individualmente. Noi siamo colpiti e parliamo di nuova guerra fredda per i russi che entrano in Crimea, ma 40 anni fa, di questi giorni, i russi con i loro carri armati entravano a Praga e qualche anno prima erano entrati a Budapest. E a noi che oggi abbiamo l'ansia per i coltelli o i macete sul treno, in quegli anni avevamo l'ansia per gli attacchi nucleari. Parliamo e giustamente ci preoccupiamo per la crisi economica e per il default di paesi possibili, di paesi come la Grecia, del Venezuela, eccetera, ma ci dimentichiamo che abbiamo avuto negli anni 80 e 90 interi continenti che sprofondavano. La crisi dell'America Latina col default di diversi paesi, la crisi in Asia delle tigri asiatiche contemporaneamente. Ci preoccupa il destino della democrazia. Quante volte sentiamo parlare della democrazia in crisi, democrazia in affanno, ma ci dimentichiamo che non 2000 anni fa, ma 20-30 anni fa, più di metà del mondo era in mano a dittature. L'Asia era per buona parte dittature, metà dell'Europa geografica era una dittatura, l'America Latina era tutta governata da dittature, l'Africa era per buona parte governata da dittatura. Ci preoccupano e ci creano ansia i 130.000, 140.000 migranti che arrivano ogni anno, ormai quest'anno la stima è la stessa, lo scorso anno nel nostro paese, 140.000 come gli abitanti della città che ci ospita oggi. E la città che ci ospita oggi, con la sua provincia, è interessante perché noi siamo paralizzati, abbiamo l'ansia per come accogliere in Italia 50 milioni, 60 milioni di abitanti questi 140.000, quando qui a pochi chilometri c'è Cesenatico che ha 20.000 abitanti e che ogni estate nel mese di agosto aggiunge ai suoi 20.000 70.000 persone, che non sono ovviamente migranti, ma una città deve accogliere, saper funzionare, avere servizi pubblici, ospedali, eccetera, perché c'è anche questo, per questo numero di persone. Sono ben consapevole che sono due fenomeni diversi, ma mi serve per dare il senso quanti cesenatico ci sono in Italia che accolgono ogni anno d'estate 3 volte la loro popolazione e la sola Cesenatico ne accoglie 75, cioè la metà dei migranti che riceviamo. Ci mette ansia, neanche tanto se devo dire, perché siamo distratti da altre cose, il dramma dei 250.000 morti in Siria in questi 5 anni, 250.000 morti in 5 anni. Ma 20 anni fa in Ruanda sono morte 800.000 persone in 4 settimane. Quindi quando descriviamo la catastrofe dell'oggi con lo spunto che diceva Monica prima, dobbiamo ricordarci che non è che il passato era una passeggiata. Nel passato avevamo singole crisi che erano ben più serie.
There were other crises that were also extremely difficult to tackle. We have two problems today, providing this feeling of anguish. 20, 30 years ago, there were things happening over there and things happening here. Now, there's no distance anymore. If there's a war in Syria, the migrants arrive here, so it means that the impact is felt in Milan, for instance. There is terrorism invading, so to speak, Iraq and Syria, but then there is a spillover here in Italy. So what is there, it is also here. There's a coup d'etat in Turkey. Turkey had like 4 coups d'etat. And in the world there have been so many coups d'etat, but in Turkey this becomes a problem for Germany, because in Germany there are 3 million Turks living there, and what these people feel in terms of the reaction of the German government to the coup d'etat in Turkey can have an impact on the country. Then there is a second aspect. Every single crisis is not more serious than those of the past. But the problem is that they all come together. We have an economic crisis that has already lasted 8 years. 8 years of the Brexit, then Syria. We have the emergency. We call it an emergency, but it is an emergency that is repeating itself every year, that of the migrants. Why do we have all these crises at the same time? Because we cannot solve these critical problems anymore. We can just put like a patch, like a form of temporary solution that doesn't last. Paolo was saying that we have all these crises, so this is actually what gives us this idea of living in an unmanageable situation. He says that we cannot solve these crises because we cannot manage them one by one as we used to do in the past, or we cannot solve them because we cannot face the pressure of all these crises coming together. Why can we no longer solve these crises? Why is it difficult to understand the situation in Libya? Why is the economic crisis still bringing about the same problems? As the discussor was saying this morning, if I have a problem in terms of profits that need to be justified every 3 months, just like it was 3 or 10 years ago, and today I have the same problem because nothing actually changed. Well, this means that I'm working for a value, but then I have an obligation. I have a deadline every 3 months, and I have to prove that I am creating a profit. So why can't we at least partially solve some of these crises? Well, all these crises, from the economic crisis to terrorism to economic crisis, they are global crisis and local crisis at the same time. They may emerge in some other regions of the world, but then they have an impact on us. And the reason why we cannot solve them is that we no longer have those mechanisms that we used to resort to solve locally and globally crises. The tools we used to have don't work anymore. Monica was saying that we have very old tools that cannot be used for today's tools. So we have this local level with the global level, and then we have these instruments, these tools. Let's start with the local level. Let's take, for instance, the United States or a European country. We are emerging from a long economic crisis, even though there are countries like the United States where there is a crisis, where there is an economic and income gap which is notable, but this crisis was matched with the problem of immigration. It's different in the United States, but well, at the end of the day, it is the same thing. And then there is terrorism. All these elements are impacting on the people. And in every country, they are trying to find alternative solutions that could be populism, both left and right-winged, nationalism, abstention. And the result is, well, it's always the same. In all Western countries, we are witnessing governments that are extremely weak because voters do not know exactly what is best for them, and each government, they cannot really govern with a real majority. So we have a very weak government. Let's look at France, Holland has a very low popularity, for instance. And then we have had weak countries in Italy and in Greece because we had technical government. And then Spain, after Belgium, it is a country without a government for over 1 year now. So all these governments cannot face local problems with ambitious policies that could be not very popular among people, with far-sighted politics. As the ENG CEO was saying this morning, this 3 months deadline. So there is a leadership crisis at a global level. I'd just like to share with you a few examples. All of us were moved by the picture 1 year ago of the child dead on the beach in Greece. We all saw as positive the leadership decision by Angela Merkel, who decided to open up the borders. But that's not a real leadership. I mean, it's not enough. This picture of the child is not enough to change a country's politics and then to go back to the previous one just a few weeks later. That child has become a symbol, but every day there are victims of this migration flow. Then Omran, the other Syrian child who was saved from the bombing, and we've seen his picture everywhere on the media. And maybe we thought that that picture could make Putin change his mind, and maybe he can decide to give a truce. But so why should we wait for a picture of a child to grant some peace to a country? Does Putin really need to see the picture of Omran to understand that his bombs are not hitting terrorists, they're hitting people? And there is no leadership in Obama that lets Lavrov and the Russians convince him not to bomb Assad 2 years ago because they are giving back chemical weapons, even though we know that the people who died in Syria did not die because of chemical weapons. So what is this kind of leadership that of Hollande and of the French government that in front of a problem that after Bataclan became a problem of individual groups with knives or with a truck, and the reply is the calling to military service the population, so or opening up the debate on the Burkini. On the theme of immigration, with no offense to politicians, isn't it weird that the only two incentives to discuss the problem of immigration, to take a new perspective, to look for new solutions, came from a journalist of the Italian state television and a prefect that, who will soon retire. But that's weird. We need to have a wider scenario, to have a wider vision. A journalist who's has become really famous, and well, that means that there is something that doesn't really work. So now let's go up to the global level. I'm sorry, can I interrupt you? The two names that you just quoted and were not, do not have to be re-elected. All the others do. Anyway, so this is the fascination of strong men and dictatorships. What do Italian, what kind of leader attracts Italians? Putin, Erdogan, just not long a time ago. Let's move to the global level. We have never been good at solving global crises. We had a lot of global crises, in fact. But over the decades, we created three tools, three mechanisms, three aspects that could help. Globalization for everything, because positive globalization, which is a win-win situation, creates interdependence. So if there is economic interdependence, there is no war, because I would not attack someone who buys my products, obviously. Then we found out that globalization can be sometimes not so positive. Then the second tool was that there should be, so to speak, positive power, not the Soviet Union, that could be willing to become the guardian of the world. But as Monica Maggioni said, as a result of the 11th September, the Americans are not so well positive. They did a lot of mistakes. And since they also spent $4,000 billion for the war in Afghanistan and in Iraq, $4,000 billion. That is 3 times the Italian GDP. Since they realized they had made big mistakes, they're no longer willing to be the world's guardians. And then the third pillar was that of international organization, first of all, the United Nations. Let's think about what happened 3 days ago. On the same day, we had De Mistura, who said about Syria, with this situation, the United Nations cannot carry on humanitarian interventions, and one of the main members of the United Nations is Russia, and was Russia was bombing that country. So the United Nations was protesting because another member of the United Nations is creating the problems that the United Nations are called upon to solve. And then, to conclude on the tools we can no longer use. As I said, I believe here there might be a lot of students of international law. The whole doctrine of the United Nations that was meant to overcome a world's crisis, and it was based on containing, on limiting the conflicts between two states. It cannot deal in internal politics, but now we only have internal conflicts, so the United Nations cannot do anything. Also, the idea of negotiations, which is at the very heart of the UN culture. Let's think about ISIS. We cannot have ISIS representatives sit at the one table to negotiate with the Islamic State. Let's think about the monetary fund, which for over 50 years has brought order in mechanisms that were meant to fight inflation. Now we are experiencing deflation. Let's think about Europe. Monica said Europe has not really fought these wars, these battles. But there is only one line of foreign policy that really contributed to peace. That is to say, that of the enlargement. It is a bit like a globalization that becomes interdependence. Enlargement of the Union meant including more countries, but now we are actually making Europe smaller, not bigger. So we wanted a policy that could bring down borders, but now we are rebuilding our internal borders. We created tools meant to counter international terrorism, controls in airports, interception systems, and we are now fighting against a single man with a knife. And I'd like to close just to make you understand how unsuitable our tools are at the moment. Media, the Italian government has a law for the safeguard of children. So, for instance, the pictures of children cannot be seen on TV. Well, the other day, there were pictures of Omran with the covered face because of the safeguard of this child. So we are safeguarding in our country the image of a child who lives in a country where children are being killed. We are talking about the children who lost their lives in Syria, but we don't talk about the children who cannot go to school in Syria or in Lebanon. And we have to think about the consequences in the long run. And with Monica, we were talking about how her experience in Iraq, she is still terrorized by certain noises, blasts, and we are talking about children who have been listening to bombs and blasts for years. When a Syrian man in Germany went crazy, we realized that after wars, there can be really difficult problems, psychological problem to overcome. But well, these people, these are millions of people who will have the same memories and will have psychological problems. And we are covering the face of Omran in our pictures, in our papers.
No, devo dire che il mondologo.
Well, the world expert has really provided us with a lot of food for thought to understand things, and he has also spoken very passionately. So is an expert that is really interested and that does want to give his own contribution as much as possible. And we can feel that. And when talking about these topics, we all feel very, very little in the big wheel of history. And we are somewhat afraid before this scenario, a lack of leadership, lack of skills, lack of ability, local level, at global level. I was talking to a cardinal some time ago. I mean, he said, we need to accept that before us there is a hard times. We often think that problems can be solved. Some years ago, there was a Father Pizzabanta. We were talking about the Holy Lands, and we all have this rational idea, enlightened or Catholic idea, that there are some problems in the Holy Land, and these problems can be solved. But since he was living there, and I was asking him, how can he solve the situation? He said, talking about the situation in Israel and Palestine, he said, there's no possible solution to this situation. We are living problems that cannot be solved. What consequences does that have on our own life and on our possibility to give our own contribution? We live under very serious conditions. They're so serious, they're so bad that we feel very little. So understanding, acknowledging that living inside problems that cannot be solved means surrendering. Does that mean surrendering, or what does that mean? How can we contribute, all of us? We all come to the meeting every year. We try to establish relations. This is our task. This is why we're here. We want to be in this world, and this is why we are in this meeting. So my final question that I'm going to ask Monica Maggioni is the following. The world is totally out of control. Is it so? Is it really out of control? Well, actually, our way of looking at things is out of control. I don't know whether the world is out of control. As Paolo Magri said, we are not able to react to things. This is what is out of control. And I totally agree with the pizza balla on everything. But I doubt that maybe the problem is not that problems cannot be solved. They cannot be solved the way we're used to solving them. We need to make a different effort. First of all, the effort to understand. So I will continue to think this room, which has been full for hours today, for trying to understand. So thank you for trying to understand. Hearing about listening to people who are talking about an enormous problems which somehow can be solved in a rational way, but we need to urge people to solve this problem. We all have to make an effort to understand these problems and how they can be solved. I think that this is part and parcel of the solution. I don't believe that finding a solution to the major diseases has been simple. There was an extraordinary session on physics before. I don't think that studying physics is easier than studying the dynamics between different countries in the world. Yeah, but we need to make an effort to do that. We need also to use our fantasy to understand complex problems. So disorder is the key word. Where does the disorder stem from? Where does it come from? In the past, there were order systems. There was not only September the 11th. Paolo was very good at talking about the other crisis. The economic crisis, in its own way, is a sort of September the 11th, which is just as complex. So this disorder is a disorder in many different sectors. This disorder does not only concern the fact that somebody is threatening us. Where does it come from? Where does disorder come from? Over this year, we've been trying to think and write about terrorism and how terrorism is made. We have problems to understand politics and where politics is heading to in our countries. Every day we hear about the debate among political parties and alliances. Traditional alliances no longer apply. The same thing applies to terrorism. At the end of the 90s, early 2000, terrorism was governed by vertical schemes with heads, messages that were spread around, and sometimes actions like 9/11. And they were in line with this scheme. This scheme no longer exists. In some cases it does apply, but this is just part and parcel of a horizontal scheme, which no longer exists. Just like political consensus. Political consensus is not in line with a vertical logic, so to speak. It's not messages, top-down messages. It's a horizontal scheme. And this is how we, the same way we communicate, we share, because most things happen according to a horizontal scheme, because we live in a horizontal dimension. We communicate through the net, through the web, the social media, in a horizontal way. Our way to communicate is a horizontal one, and politics is coming to grapple with that. And that was totally unthinkable 10 or 15 years ago. The same applies to terrorists. There's no longer forums of the 90s or the year 2000 where sheiks gave the guidelines and the actions for jihad, and that therefore people followed suit. Today there are horizontal messages disseminated through the web, and they manage to contaminate people who are far away. The 7 trillions of America that were spent in the war against terror today are totally useless, because there's one person using a knife and killing people, and these 3 trillions are totally useless. So the logics today is totally different. The logics is a horizontal one. It's not top-down logic, but it's a horizontal one. And there you can also find a solution, although this is a paradox. Each one of you, every time sometimes somebody is telling you the fairy tale of the a big invasion whereby we will become totally different. Well, that fairy tale can be totally denied with what we have just said. So we heard together the Marrakesh Declaration. Horizontally, we don't need some heads or chiefs stating that. Each one of us writing on the web has its own constituency. One of the latest vertical systems is the one applied by the media, and no chance that the media are now attacked, because now we have a horizontal dimension and we can dismantle all this system in a horizontal way. So what still applies are the existing needs, and maybe we can start solving the problems from that. So the approach we should take is looking at what is happening outside, trying to find practical solutions, trying to put forward political proposals to something which is far from being an invasion, like the Scalzi used to say, and like the meeting is telling us this year. There's a way to say that horizontally, by using this horizontal dimension, we can change the world. And this is why, for one day, we've been talking about this, because if we say you are good for me, well, that becomes part of the solution to the problems we have today. I like this horizontal dimension before this feeling of being overwhelmed. The horizontal dimension means finding a new opportunity. To conclude, I don't want to be a world expert. I don't pretend to be a world expert. I'm just a passionate reader of different topics. One of the things I was most struck by is the reconciliation process between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland. The crisis lasted for a century, was a complex one. People who are as old as I am will remember horrible images about that topic with revenge is going on for years. I read an article about from a Israeli writer, Rossman, who wrote, "We in the Israeli-Palestinian issue, I've always wondered, how has Northern Ireland managed?" And they asked the Northern Irish to organize a workshop that was held in Geneva or Brussels, I don't remember. And that was a workshop where the Irish explained the Palestinians and the Israelis how they managed to find a solution. How did they manage? Well, somebody at some point started to think that the other was a person that was worth meeting. Otherwise, the past would have always prevailed. So either something happens or the past always wins. And in the past, people are always right and wrong. I read the dialogues and the interviews of these people participating in a reconciliation process that was far from being easy. But at some point, these people started to talk to each other and started to acknowledge each other and started to look at the present and no longer at the past. And that was really very interesting. This is one of the rare cases, together maybe with South Africa, with the Reconciliation Commission after the fall of apartheid. So such a complex and such a paralyzed issue full of hatred found a solution. They found a solution by acknowledging each other. To me, in this horizontal, to me this is the great opportunity in this horizontal dimension, because this is an opportunity that we all have, and the great opportunity to tackle the disorder now existing in the world. So let's call it a day. I hope that this day has been interesting for you. Thank you very much to Monica Maggioni. And to her patience. And also, thank you very much to her passion for the meeting, as far as I have seen. Thank you for her interest in the meeting, and thank you for helping us. Thank you very much to Paolo Magri also, who has provided us with a lot of food for thought, and the food for thought is the first tool and the first good for all of us. Thank you.